What does it mean to call for a ceasefire when thousands of Palestinians and thousands of Israelis have already died? I mean, what does it mean? I mean, there'll just be, there will continue to be these murderous events on both sides ad infinitum.
The country's ambassador to the UN in Israel is calling for the resignation of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, after he made these comments to the UN Security Council last night.
The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They have seen their land steadily devoured by settlements and plagued by violence, their economy stifled, their people displaced, and their homes demolished. Their hopes for a political solution to their plight have been vanishing. But the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas, and those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
Guterres also accused Israel of violating international humanitarian law in its retaliatory airstrikes on Gaza. Israel's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Eli Cohen, addressed the council right after Guterres.
As we meet here today, young babies, children are held in Gaza. This is beyond imagination. A living nightmare. These kids witness horror which cannot be described by words.
Richard Spencer is reporting for The Times from Israel, and he joins me now. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning.
What's the latest this morning? Is there any chance of emergency fuel being supplied to Gaza after events yesterday?
We know no more than we did yesterday. These negotiations carry on. Trickles of aid go in. I think 8 trucks went in overnight. This is, of course, not nearly enough to keep all those millions of people fed and give them enough water, let alone the fuel needed for the hospitals. I think that's going to be the big row for the rest of the day on the humanitarian front, with Israel saying that there is more fuel in Gaza than Hamas are saying, and Hamas saying that the hospitals are about to have to close down, babies on life support machines and so on, and in incubators, paying the price.
And international pressure, such as that we've just heard, international condemnation of Israel, seems to be growing. In Westminster, we'll hear in just a moment about rising calls for a ceasefire from the Labour Party backbenches. How is this playing into the thinking of the Israeli government and the IDF, this rising chorus of criticism from the UN and other quarters?
I think the criticism of the UN is not taken seriously. It's caused outrage, obviously, from Israeli politicians. This slightly cumbersomely phrased moral commentary by Antonio Guterres. But on the other hand, when the US is looking with horror at the scenes from Gaza and the thousands of people being killed there, the children who are being killed in their hundreds, if not thousands, also, then that has some weight with Israel. What I think the lesson I draw from all these calls from all sides for this or that, from Israel itself calling for understanding, from European leaders calling for a ceasefire, or Macron yesterday managed in a very Macron-like way to call for everything. He called for a Western coalition to fight Hamas like it fought ISIS, but he also called for restraint on Israel, and he called for a solution to the plight of the Palestinian people. All this does is throw effectively meaningless words, which can nevertheless be used to fuel the fire of one side or the other. And it seems to me both pointless and unhelpful to have these calls, particularly from world leaders in the UN, unless they're going to say, what their alternative is for both sides. I mean, until you say to Israel, what is your plan for the future of Israel and the people, the Palestinian people, please explain. And unless they say to the Palestinian side, to Hamas and the Palestinian Authority and individual pro-Palestinian voices outside this territory. What is your plan to make Israel feel secure again? What does any of this mean? What does it mean to call for a ceasefire when thousands of Palestinians and thousands of Israelis have already died? I mean, what does it mean? I mean, there'll just be, there will continue to be these murderous events on both sides ad infinitum. It doesn't mean anything.
In this morning's Times, Richard, you write that Hamas is continuing hostage negotiations with Israel. Front page of this morning's Times, seen a very striking scenes of Yocheved Lifshitz, the 85-year-old who's released by Hamas yesterday. You write that Hamas hopes it can drive a wedge within the Israeli government if it keeps negotiating the release of hostages. Can you tell us a bit more?
Well, for sure. So Hamas has perceived, I think, that there is doubt in the Israeli government, in the war cabinet, as to when and how, and indeed increasingly one has to ask whether it's going to go ahead with this ground invasion. It's seen that there are these conflicting voices coming from Israel's allies and from the international community. And so it suddenly inserted the hostage negotiations, which have been going on right from the beginning, into this political milieu. Israel has always said right from the beginning that the hostage issue will be kept completely separate from whether there will be a ground invasion of Gaza, which it said it didn't specifically specify a ground invasion, but it said it would eradicate Hamas, which obviously implies a ground invasion. As the longer this impasse goes on without a ground invasion, the more people will be looking at these hostages and saying, well, maybe if they are coming out, maybe if Hamas starts releasing them, maybe if there are, as we understand, negotiations for the status for what will happen to the 50 or so who have dual nationality, maybe this is something we should wait for. And by doing that, Hamas can not only, string out the process, but it can also allow these doubts about what Israel's plans are to develop within Israel and between Israel and its, backers in America and the West.
Richard Spencer, reporting for The Times from Israel. Thanks very much for joining us on Times Radio this morning to talk us through the latest from the conflict in the Middle East. You can read Richard's reporting in The Times.